Becky here, Cornerstone Advisors Editor-at-Large. Welcome to Money Isn't Everything. In today's episode, I sit down with John Thompson, who's the Vice President of Financial Services at H&R Block, and we talk about Spruce, the brand's neobank. We also get into the misconceptions around financial health, the perks of having physical locations, and his love-hate relationship with the tax refund. Here's our conversation. John, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to join you today. Looking forward to it.
I know we're reconnecting, and I know financial health is something that matters to us both. And I think some of our earlier conversations were on tax refunds. So I'm curious to get updates about that now that you're at Spruce. But I want to start with like the brand mission, which is, it seems so critical that, Spruce is a brand aimed at helping people get better at money. And, this is a thing. A number of startups, that's undercounting it, certainly want to do. But like the reality is messier. It's like changing behavior in some cases. In some cases, it's like a bigger deal of like, I need more income. There are other forces at play. But I'm curious, what's the opportunity here for a digital app to help people improve financial outcomes?
Love that question. It's a perfect one to start with. I think it gets at a lot of why I wanted to join H&R Block and work on Spruce and work on other things after spending the last few years researching and writing about the things that affect people's financial health and the interconnectivity of the different aspects of financial health: spending, saving, borrowing, planning, and earning. And, trying to turn the theoretical into the practical and the profitable. Of course, if there is no margin, then of course there is no mission. And so, I think the opportunity that I saw with H&R Block and the role that Spruce can play is it's part of the day job of the company to help address the needs that its customers have. Especially its middle income and lower income customers. It's more financially vulnerable and financially coping customers. And it doesn't have to stretch. The company doesn't have to stretch, and Spruce doesn't have to stretch to find those people. That's the regular customer. So if we understand their problems deeply, we can start to figure out how mobile solutions, mobile experiences can address those.
And H&R Block has physical locations. So that's an interesting thing. And I'm wondering, are people signing up through those physical locations? There's always the debate. Do you need a physical location? Blah, blah, blah. I know we laugh because
Isn't that a fun dimension to add to a fintech, like actually doing retail and having humans? And it was such an interesting thing to think about. I think of it as a real asset, especially if you can think and act long term to leverage that asset. So in our case with H&R Block, the millions of minutes and hundreds of thousands of hours that we spend with people in a advisory capacity, if you want to think about it that way, centered around potentially the most important financial transaction of the year, provides enormous opportunity to both learn and share with people how to address their challenges. And so for us, like building Spruce as a product was one thing. And we launched the product about 2 years ago. And for the 2 years that we've been doing that, we're also engaged in a process to teach our tax professionals about what the product is, teach them about the customer problems we're trying to solve, and get them to love it, right? And you don't just turn a distribution system on like that and just tell people what to do. Got to get them to buy in, got to listen to it and learn it. And so I think as we lay the calendar out in the future, the tax professional is one of the most important advocates for not only the product but also for the customer.
That is a really important point, because I feel like if I think of the branch employee, I know there's a disconnect sometimes in like promoting certain things. And I'm curious, what's like, how do you help that employee want to promote this kind of product?
This has been a fascinating process to learn.
Yeah.
At least I personally have I don't know, maybe sort of a strange experience with H&R Block. I've worked here for
Mhm.
2 years, but I also worked here 15 years ago.
Oh.
So I understood for about 7 years. It was a really wonderful experience. And so I knew enough about how the tax professional culture operated that I didn't have to start from scratch when we kind of came back this time and took another run at it. I think if we were to tell our branch staff, that's not really what we call them, but like it's the
Yeah.
functional equivalent, right? If we were to tell them what to do or put kind of sales quotas out there and like have people go push it, not going to work at all. In our case, we have to invest in teaching the tax professional about the customer problems we're trying to solve,
Mhm.
and how the product actually solved those, and then provide some real proof points so that they can trust the product. And they're not going to connect their customers with it until they trust it. So for us, it's been a couple cycles of investing in teaching, in listening, and really trying to provide, I guess, social proof to our field staff.
Yeah. That's a lot better. I'm having a memory of when I was a barista as a teenager and they'd have me answer the phone like, come on and cool off with a blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no,
No,
I can't do this. But I didn't quit. Well, I quit at the end of summer.
Well, one of the really fun parts about this is like we're generally in our field dealing with very experienced, capable, knowledgeable professionals. Like
Mhm.
these are experts and experts in one dimension of financial life, or potentially many dimensions of financial life. And so, like you got to not just with the customer, but with the tax professional, you have to meet them where they're at.
Mhm.
We have a very interesting mix of the way people find the way consumers find their way to Spruce. Sometimes it's through the website, sometimes it's through social media, sometimes it's through the tax professional introducing the product and either a customer taking it at the very point or perhaps taking it next year.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's when they're doing their taxes with us in a do-it-yourself capacity. It's actually one of the really successful channels that we've had. And then other times, wow, it's fascinating how the customers just talk to each other
Oh
and
yeah.
stuff starts happening in the front lobby. I tried this. Have you tried this? Have you tried this? And obviously, that's the way a lot of other sort of mobile banking or mobile tech experiences have grown.
Um, John, I want to early in here, I want to like lay some of the foundations of like misconceptions perhaps of consumers. But one
Okay.
segment I do have is that's what you said. And so I've been listening to you without you knowing. But in the last couple of days, I've been listening to some of your other podcasts. And on one of them, and I think this is such an important point, you said, if I make a lot of money, then I'm going to be financially healthy. Not true. It's not even the top 10 most predictive indicators of financial health. It's important. And then you said a few other things, but it's not the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that because I feel like this is one of those really confusing areas for people in financial services and probably even more than that.
Yeah, just people in life. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember where I actually said that, but I do remember it. So thank you
That's
for
a good
bringing
start. I think it was under the
um,
Ultra Federal Credit Union podcast.
before before I worked at H&R Block. I worked at a nonprofit called the Financial Health Network, which used to be called CFSI, Center for Financial Services Innovation. And at that organization, we were really researching, at least what I thought, and the people who ran that organization thought was the future of financial inclusion, which was understanding that it isn't enough to just get people to buy mainstream high quality products and use it. Like part of what matters in all of that is their outcomes. Like in the
Mhm.
process of using a product or a feature, does it actually help somebody? And how would you even know that? And so we started to build a mechanism there at the Financial Health Network about how to measure financial health. We defined indicators of financial health. We did benchmarking studies to really try to understand that. And then for about the last 8 years, Financial Health Network has been measuring the financial health of Americans, how it's changing and why it's changing. And we, in the process, found, I'll just caveat, there are extremes. If you are hyper high income or hyper low income, you can kind of earn your way out of problems, or, financial health isn't your main problem. But we actually found some of the most financially healthy people were lower income, but their behaviors were really strongly oriented around the things that made them good savers, spenders, borrowers, planners. And those behaviors mattered more than purely just income. And that's obviously a real debate in society about, like, where should we be spending our time? And is it all just about making more money? And at least from a financial health perspective, it isn't only about that.
Right. Which is, I mean, I've heard this before, and it's still striking to me because it's very, it's just, I think it just points how big of a problem we're in. And which probably lends it.
What was interesting is as I worked my way into the tax industry, Spruce is not specifically a tax-oriented product, but I did really start to think about earning a lot more than I did when I was just working on sort of more of the theoretical or academic constructs around financial health. And I think there were a couple of factors that were important there. Really understanding the volatility that many people face in incomes and expenses, the difficulty that they have in predicting their income, even though we have a financial system, right, that's mostly built under the assumption that you have a 9-to-5 job, that you make a salary, that you can pay your bills every month, and they're all the same. And it's just not really the way it works for a lot of people. And I think that is something we've really tried to take into account in the way that we were building Spruce, because we see that in many of the customers that we work with too, making money from lots of different places. Some months are good, some months are not so good. And, they're looking for insights and ability to kind of deal with that volatility.
Yeah. And that is like, when you don't know how much you'll earn or win, what a big problematic mystery that is. I'm in Los Angeles, so all kinds of people here are living that life. And I know much outside of LA too, but especially here. Well, this kind of lends itself to, on one hand, you could say Spruce came into the neobanking game a little bit late, but on the other hand, you're talking about this gig working cash flow challenge, and that's how you're like cornering the market. But I guess I'm curious, and I know H&R Block has this history of like exploring financial services, and I think went after a charter or had a charter or something.
Had a charter for 7 years.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so see, not its first rodeo in this world, but why was it? Why launch in the last couple of years this brand?
I think a couple of things. With the current leadership, which started maybe about 6 years ago, as we sort of reimagined what the strategy of the company might be around improving confidence of customers and reducing financial hardship of customers. It made us start to think about the overall business a little bit differently. Not only was it important to be very effective, efficient, and exceptional at tax preparation, but we also needed to start to deal with some of the other challenges our customers were facing if we were going to meet that mission centered on improving confidence. And so we really set forth an imperative in financial services, like that we needed to attack some of the key challenges that customers would face. If we could do that, we could both, drive growth for the company, but we could also engender a kind of brand loyalty, retention, and so on and so forth that are important for the enterprise. And when we looked around, and at the time, I guess this was maybe about 3 years ago, right before I joined, we said, you know what, we just don't have the platforms and the technology to deliver those kinds of experiences. At the time, we were actually running one of the largest prepaid debit card programs in the country, a product called Emerald Card, which we still have. It's still a very successful product. but it's built on technology that's about 16, 17 years old, right? And we just weren't going to be able to meet the customer's expectations in terms of engagement and solutions around their financial life, building on that kind of technology. So we looked around, we decided that we wanted to build instead of partner. And so we did that. And it was actually a fascinating process to observe. I joined right at the end, right before we launched.
Oh,
right before we launched.
What a moment to join.
Like, awesome. What have we built? Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
But the company did some really amazing things. It went from first line of code to launch product in less than 6 months, which is really fast. And I think one of the funnest parts was taking, as a leadership challenge, kind of taking that team and turning it from a build mode to, really figuring out how to make the product be great and figure out how to grow it.
Well, let's talk. I mean, we've danced around this, but like the tax refund, and I know this blurs into like, hey, this is one of the few opportunities for a lot of people to like make or have more money, or perhaps it's already been spent. But at least then it's like money that can be used to pay off the bills. I mean, how do you see the tax refund? I mean, do you see it as helping improve people's financial outcomes? Is it, or, it's just a Band-Aid?
I love it and I hate it at the same time. So let me see if I can explain what both of those things mean and maybe how they come together in this work. I'll start with I hate it. I hate it because it's so lumpy. And for many low-income families, this is 15, 20, 25% of their net income. And here it is stuck until March, and I can't get it to March. So it forces me as a provider to do all sorts of interesting things between kind of about Halloween and the beginning of March when I get my tax refund to sort of make it all work. And tax time is kind of the one period where I can catch up and get steady, get right, get confident, and then it's back into the craziness. And so like, I really do wish we could find some ways to smooth that out. We saw that in COVID with the advanced child tax credit delivery. Like, it helped people a lot to be able to receive that money regularly instead of in one lump sum. So that's the hate part of it. The love part of it is it's such a unique moment in somebody's annual financial life. They have money. They're thinking about money. They've got all their documentation together. They're trying to make good decisions with this money. And so like, it's a massive opportunity to help. Like, one of the coolest things that we've done in Spruce, I think, is facilitate the process of saving at tax time. Like, if you were to stack rate the things that I think Spruce is good at, it's probably the best in the savings portfolio, short-term savings portfolio. And one of the things that we always do is give the customer a chance to pre-commit a portion of their tax refund into their savings account, siphon it off before it actually arrives, and pop up this little scroll bar, and the person can kind of dial it up or dial it down. We suggest 15%, but more than half of the customers that we present that opportunity dial it up to like 30%.
Oh, wow.
And what that means, this is what we see when we talk to them, is that they're still spending that money, but it means they're spending that money more closely aligned to the way that they wanted to, because they set some of it aside. And like, that's really encouraging to me. That's a way we're going to turn short-term savings into long-term savings, into asset building, retirement, some of these kinds of things where, places that we're going to start to go next.
Yeah, you have some interesting features that I want to get into, but I'm curious, are you finding Spruce's customers are asking for the tax refund early? Is that happening?
The short answer to that question is yes. Right? It is a speed issue, but it's also a confidence issue, right? I think, one of the real challenges with tax refunds, especially if you claim the earned income tax credit, is that you have to wait a long time for it in the IRS, and you don't know when it's coming, right? So anything you can do to sort of establish certainty or confidence, like, imagine you have a big payday coming, but you don't actually know when the payday is going to be. Like, how do you plan for that?
Oh,
It's a really challenging experience. And so
it is.
for people to say, I can get this thing 3, 4, 5, 6 days early, like it's helpful. So
It is helpful, but I'm curious because banking is such a complicated beast, let's say. So like it's one thing if they're keeping their money in the Spruce account, but if they're trying to transfer it, chances are it's still going to take a few more days. I mean, how do we deal with this like tension of on one hand can make it faster, but on the other hand, there are like broader complications that would make it hard to like move it around. How do you think about this tension?
I wish for a day soon where we're dealing in an open banking real-time funds delivery model. Like, even though the sort of I don't know, the challenging parts of the American payment system do provide some specific opportunities to help clients like do something better. Like the future is so much brighter than where we're at. We just have got to get to where we can see the information that we want and we can move money instantly. So, but we don't have that, right? We don't have that.
John, you gave me a flashback. Someone once told me a couple of years ago, checking account can't get worse. I mean, it always can, frankly. It always can, but I like the opinion.
Start charging the overdraft again.
Yeah.
I think the one of the real interesting and unique challenges at tax time is that in a traditional banking sense, everything can look like fraud because you're moving so much money so fast.
Yes.
Right. And it isn't like normal day-to-day stuff or payroll deposit or something like that. And so it does put, I think, a fair amount of pressure, unique pressure, on the work that you do to know your customer, to really validate their identity, and to monitor their transaction behavior. And some of that's all of that is actually required from a regulatory perspective, but like you got to go a little farther when it comes to tax time because the risks that consumers face if you lose that money or you lose access to it for some portion of time, like now it really hurts. Like it's different than a paycheck. It's
right.
And everybody who's kind of worked around in this space understands that the pressure to do it right, especially when it comes to money movement, it can't be much higher.
No, there's always such a big tension there between experience and trying to get in front of fraud. There's a new bank called Charlie that is like slowing down money transfers up to 6 hours in case someone's being attacked by a fraudster, which I find really interesting. Which opens it up, John, to some more of the atypical features Spruce does. So I'm so glad you mentioned that commit to saving a percentage of the tax refund. That's one that was on my mind. But another is like spending limits. Are they setting spending limits?
Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
And also I'll try to break down what I mean by that. This for us, this feature, which for in our model is one of our sort of, I guess, strongest planning tools. We see a couple of different kinds of behavior. We see people who are simply monitoring their spending by category, like we can see them observing it. And then there's a sort of step up where they're actually starting to set limits and track their progress against those limits and be notified if they're touching those limits. Mm-hmm. When we talk to those customers, they're the ones that have the highest level of confidence. We were a little worried, like, is this just the people who have the most money or who are the most financially healthy? And is that what's driving their confidence? No, we think the access to information is actually helping that confidence. We think of that, at least at the moment, as kind of one of the pinnacle behaviors of Spruce when we think about engagement, deposits, and then ultimately on financial outcomes. Each of the features of Spruce, the savings ones, the credit score monitoring ones, some of the other things that it does, each of those, when we get a customer to try those things, their engagement goes up, deposit levels typically go up. But the one around budgeting is the one that really unlocks somebody. And when they can do that, it's interesting to watch them, they really fully commit to Spruce. And that's really cool to see.
Wow.
We still think of this as a very MVP feature, though. Like, this is the basic entry point of what this feature can do. There's so much more to come here.
Oh, I bet. I had some ideas of the direction it might take. But even now, just as like an expression of like a budgeting hack, like I've been reviewing some videos from Gen Z who are like still like stuffing money in a like glass jar, right? To like, force a behavior pattern kind of thing. So it's, in theory, digital would be better at doing that. But yeah.
Well, we haven't quite, we don't quite have I guess, market position or, to really be able to narrow in and say one particular segment is our only focus, right? Because we work with H&R Block, who works with all of America, right? The demographic of the H&R Block customer is the demographic of America. Young, old, wealthy, not wealthy, financially healthy, not financially healthy. And so since we're connected to a larger brand, we do see all sorts of different kinds of behavior as opposed to massive concentration. Generally speaking, we've had to push ourselves to say, like, okay, we got to build for the next generation. That's when we're thinking about bill pay, we're not thinking about, the way my parents paid bills. We're thinking about the way millennials, Gen Z, and even the next generation are starting to think about, how am I going to pay my bills?
Yeah.
And trying to listen to them while not ignoring the whole customer set.
Right, which is so hard to do among many challenges. John, 2 questions left for you. And one, it's like, you've been the researcher, now you're in the wild, seeing what's happening with the product. What do you think banks and credit unions get wrong about this audience, either within their digital banking experiences or maybe just like stereotypes, or, what? Maybe let's limit it. There's probably so much, but 1 or 2 things.
Yeah, I say it as someone who worked really closely with banks and credit unions for most of the last decade, and love them. There's really interesting, kind of cool things that are happening there. I think one of the things that I see is, like, you have the challenge, a weird challenge around scale when you work at a bank or a credit union, especially a larger one. And here's what I mean by that. Like, when you're starting a company, you have a chance to be small, and you have a chance to care about every single customer, and you have a chance to care about every single experience and focus in on it. And that, when you're small, you get all of these little experiences right. And, because you're dealing with a scope and a scale that you can kind of manage within a team, even a small team. You go build Spruce at H&R Block and you launch it, like, it's big, fast, and you never got a chance to be small and really study and improve the individual customer experiences. And I think it's just really hard to do at a bank. And the ones who can do that focus on continuous improvement, experience improvement. Like, you got to force yourself to do that, because the natural rhythm of a business that's operating at scale kind of draws you away from that.
Yeah, well, that's such a really helpful reminder of such an important issue. John, one last question for you, but before that, where should people find you or learn more about Spruce?
SpruceMoney.com. Best way to follow me and the team that is building Spruce is on LinkedIn. You start with me, the 2 leaders of the product are Helen Robb and Melissa Almatar, fantastic leaders that are really showing the way. A small but mighty group of product managers, engineers, and designers at our team.
All right. And John, what's the photo on your phone's lock screen?
It is a painting called Swagad. So this is a sort of Portuguese word that doesn't really have an English translation. It's probably the closest that you can get it is sort of this purgatory between happy and sad.
Oh.
And I just thought it was really an emotion that spoke to me about the things that, like balancing the great and the terrible in your life. And I don't know, I just like that. It reminds me every day, like, it's going to be okay.
Well, John, you have ended the show on something beautiful. So thank you. And thank you for being on Money Isn't Everything.
Wonderful. Thank you.
If there is one thing I learned, it's the industry still has tons to figure out about really understanding the volatility that many people face in their incomes and in their expenses. In 2 weeks' time, I sit down with Rodrigo Suarez, the Chief Banking and Innovation Officer at Piermont Bank. What a youngster bank. Piermont Bank, which is only 5 years old. We talk about fintech bank partnerships in the year of the consent order, and we also talk about innovations in small business banking. And if you are into written words, follow the fintech trends I'm loving on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter that comes out at the end of every month, and it's called Finteching with Mary.